that you may be interested in. We have a Women, Wealth, and Wisdom seminar on esports and gaming, a seminar on the impacts of inflation on your budget, and an credit analysis and management career seminar, a nonprofit seminar, and an affordable housing and land use seminar coming up all in the beginning of next year. So the dates are still tentative. They're pretty much set, but we're trying to work out a couple of final details on most of these, so I don't have the dates and things set up, but just watch our website and we'll look for updates. With that, let's get into today's topic and begin with the introductions of the panelists. So why don't we have you go around and introduce yourself. Mark, you want to start us out?
Mark, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Mark. My name is Mark Ruff. I have taught at UCLA Extension for a number of years. I taught as well at USC, and we were just chatting before the webinar began. We can all get along, by the way, so congratulations on that. I teach a variety of courses here: real estate investment analysis, real estate development, market analysis, as well as advanced real estate finance. And I've been in real estate for over 34 years in a variety of capacities, both on the acquisition side, the development side, as well as the finance and equity side. So I'm glad to be here, Mark. Thanks. And Enrique, thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thank you. Guillermo.
Hi, my name is Guillermo Padroni. I am a director of Salesforce implementation at Generate Capital. Also, I've been in the Salesforce CRM strategy and consulting ecosystem for approximately 15 years, but IT for the last 20 plus years, I think 25 now. I also teach Salesforce CRM Essentials and a couple other courses, all focused around CRM strategy and application of those for a broad stroke of business applications and industries. And so, yes, I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Guillermo. Greg. You're on mute, Greg.
Right. Hi, my name is Greg Padikian. I'm the head of asset management at ESI Venture Capital. So I've been working in real estate for 17 years now on acquisition asset management side. I've been teaching around 10 years, and for the last 4 years, I teach exclusively at UCLA Extension. I've been teaching Argus, market analysis, and property management.
Great, thank you. Michael.
Good morning. I'm Michael Fiorina. I am the CEO of Total Commercial Real Estate. We're a commercial real estate firm in Los Angeles County and surrounding counties. I've been teaching at Extension for years, and used to teach a bunch of courses, but after teaching a bunch of courses, we narrowed it down to Real Estate Principles, which is the basic licensing course for those seeking their real estate license in California, especially the salesperson license. Now, I've taught 26 years, I think it is, 27, 28 years. I started out in 1994, and I remember that the first two classes I had didn't occur because we didn't have enough students, meaning we had less than 10 students to start. We were still in the midst of a housing recession at the time. Some of us older guys on here remember that, like Mark Ruff remembers that.
Thanks, Mike.
And he was quite a successful commercial broker during those times. I'm also a state court receiver and a state court referee and a real estate lawyer. Our primary business, as I said, is property management, commercial leasing, and we do sales too, but it's primarily property management. And we manage 4 product types: retail, office, industrial, and multifamily. It's kind of unusual to do that, but given our days where we performed hundreds of receiverships, we learned to cross-manage, and we also trained our staff to cross-manage. They were cross-trained to manage all 4 product types. Most of my staff has been with me 20 plus years.
Great, thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, there's a lot of different areas we can go into. I think everybody during COVID started seeing more virtual tours of properties and things like that coming up. There's apps with neighborhood matches. We have people using blockchain for property titles, fractional property ownership, automated rental and purchasing algorithms we've talked a little bit about with the group in preparation for this, smart homes. So there's a lot of different areas in which you see technology beginning to creep into the industry and being used in the industry. So let's just start with getting your take on technology and how it's impacting you in the industry right now. Mark, you want to get started again?
I'm happy to. First of all, I use technology daily, lots of different websites and even apps on a phone. So I will say that I do believe truly that technology has benefited the consumer. There was a time when real estate brokers, I happen to be a broker, where we basically controlled access to information. And it was that control of the access to the information that gave us a competitive advantage. We had exclusive control over inventory. Nowadays, using apps and websites and a number of portals, Zillow is one of them, the consumer has access directly to inventory without our interface. But by the same token, we have to ask the question, well, if technology benefits the consumer, is there some flip side to that? Well, number one, the consumer does have access to the inventory today, but then what do? They usually need to call a real estate broker to help them arrange financing, help them arrange showings, inspections, appraisals, just buying a home. So yes, technology is good. It does help the consumer, but it doesn't stop there. So there has to still continue to be that human interface for, at least from the home buying perspective. There's lots of other angles to talk about, commercial investment and so forth, but that's just kind of an initial take on the typical day-to-day home buyer. They have access to information, but there still needs to be that human kind of connection to drive the process even further.
Great. Mike, you want to add to that? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the technology, we've been using technology in our business for quite a few years. I remember one of the softwares we use is called Yardi. Yardi is the last name of a guy who used to work for a company called Burroughs back in the 80s, and they fired him. And so a few years later, he developed this software called Yardi, which is the state-of-the-art software. Greg, I'm sure, it assumes that his property managers use Yardi. And that software has been around in various versions and increasingly higher prices for 30-some years. And so, and as time has gone on, we've used more and more technology. We have to. We can't afford to sit back and do things the old way, whatever the old way was. And we need to integrate technology in all aspects into our trade. But Mark makes a great point about yes, we were the gatekeepers of information. We're no longer the gatekeepers of information. However, having said that, on the residential side in this country, the vast majority, I think the figures are something around 80% or higher, the vast majority of home and condo sales still involve a real estate licensee in those states. And that's pretty standard throughout the country. The California or New York or the East or the West Coast don't monopolize that. The use of real live licensees is still quite prominent.
Yeah, and as well, I know Mike teaches real estate principles. I do as well. And what we've found is that technology is necessary. In fact, there's been some comments in textbooks asking the question, will the internet replace the real estate broker or the real estate agent? Well, the internet's been around for decades now. Access to it just increases almost on a daily basis. But yet, has the real estate broker or agent been replaced? No. Absolutely not. Real estate brokers and agents can succeed based on the number of appointments that they set, and it's an appointment-driven business. But we still need to have people kind of drive the process. It helps the consumer. We can pick up a phone, find a property within a certain neighborhood based on GPS, just based on where you are. You push an app and all of the homes pop up on your screen. But then what? Then what? The real estate agent, I don't believe, is going to be replaced. Mike Fiorina manages a number of properties. Greg likely does as well. Have we been replaced? No. We're needed more than ever, more than ever. So technology is a good thing, but then what? We have to kind of drive the process even further.
We do, and to Mark's point, the contrary to the idea that the internet has replaced real estate licensees, the reality is just the opposite. The number of licensed salespersons and brokers in California is at its highest level in history. I think it's been a few months, but the last time I checked I think there was 427,000 licensees in California, which California has 2 licenses, the salespersons and the broker's license. And it's about 2/3, 1/3 salesperson to broker. And that number is higher than ever. The membership of the National Association of Realtors, NAR, not to be confused with the NRA, but the NAR has a higher membership than in history. So if the internet is replacing licensees, it's doing a terrible job because there are more licensees in this country than ever in history.
Yeah.
One out of every 20 adults in California holds a real estate license.
Wow. Wow. That's phenomenal.
And I think just as a kind of an addition to the comment, I don't think as a result of development in technology, I don't think the licensees are going to be replaced, but I think what's going to happen is technology decreases the cost for brokers of doing business or for property managers of doing business. So, because if you have more efficient marketing, like cloud systems, if you have nowadays Yardi, right? Read system, which is way cheaper than the regular Yardi. So, or you have AppFolio. All these softwares are going to allow you to run your business at a cheaper price, and hopefully you can pass those savings to consumers. That's on one side, right? So that's why you see a lot of discount brokerage, brokers that will offer their service instead of a 6%. They'll just tell you, I'll charge you just 3% or 4%. That's because of technology. They can make more appointments. They can meet more clients. So in other words, they're achieving economies of scale. On the other hand, also, what technology does all of a sudden, because to Mark's point, is a lot of as a broker, we're losing control to the information. Now as brokers or as service providers, we've got to do a better job. We cannot just tell anything, and consumers are not gonna, bite on any information you provide them. Or, you got to always on top of the industry trends. Because nowadays, consumer can just go to Redfin, Zillow, whatever. There are numerous resources, and they can challenge your knowledge and challenge that knowledge professionally. So it won't be anymore. My neighbor thinks my property is worth $1 million. It's more going to be, hey, I go to Redfin, I go to Zillow, it shows me it's 1.2. So that's where you I think as a broker nowadays, because of technology, you have to be more up to date in terms of the laws, regulations, pricing, the market knowledge than before. If you're looking to win the business, of course, relationships still matter with your customers, but it's not as protected anymore just because of technology. So
Greg mentions the Yardi, which if you're allocating capital to investors, you want the investors to retain competent management and leasing, and then the other software that Greg mentions is AppFolio. AppFolio, we also use AppFolio, but we divide it. We use Yardi for commercial and AppFolio for multifamily. But we rely on the data provided by these entities because they provide more than just the software. They provide data as well that Guillermo can speak to as far as the support level.
Yeah, I think the benefit of technology which has always been throughout the history of time, right? It doesn't replace net total everything. It just front loads busy work, repeatable tasks, scalable tasks that you used to have to hire an army of resources and low paid workers or mid paid workers, whatever you might pay them, right? But it takes all that busy, repetitive context and effort and front loads it and pushes it now, even more so than before, to the consumer side so they can, you know, pull up a Rolodex of more properties, things that within the parameters that they believe in. But what technology seems to never fully achieve is a complete replacement of the human mind, of the human perspective, it replaces the scientific elements of property management and real estate, broadly speaking, but the art of real estate and the art of what does it smell like? What does it feel like? What is that personal sense that it's very difficult for mathematical equations to quantify? Like that will never be replaced by the human factor, even though, you know, the Teslas, the Elon Musk of the world say we're all going to end up being replaced by robotics, right? Robotics don't have emotions, don't have feelings. They can't get to a location and say, this just doesn't feel right for blah, blah, blah reasons. Computational models that get fed into it. I mean, you see articles all the time. You know, there's bias in this data set, there's bias in that data set. I am a person of XYZ color, background, and race. I have a limited perspective. Therefore, the parameters I think about are going to be based on my limited experiences. And when I bring in additional people to help me expand data models, it's still going to be biased based on those people's interpretations of what they believe is true and normal. But a real model and the perfect model would require a hive mind of the entire population of the world, and that would not be that easy to compute. So I think to Mark's point and Greg's point and Michael's point, right? Technology helps us front load it. It is a crutch, but it cannot replace the human element for sure.
If I could kind of inject as well with what Greg brought up with regard to Zillow or Redfin or RoomView or Red Door or all of these portals or apps that can try to attempt to provide valuation information, right? And Guillermo's talking about data sets. The AI or the artificial intelligence or the algorithms that are used are good as long as the data sets or the data points seem to be fairly consistent. The problem with the AI or these portals, and I deal with them all the time, I take a look at Zillow before I go and meet with a client because I want to know if they're nuts or not taking a look at Zillow. And so is that valuation information correct? Often, no, because, you know, most properties in Los Angeles are very different. Where Zillow works and these types of portals, as Greg is suggesting, and Guillermo and data sets, where they work really well is when all the data points are fairly consistent. When we get into the exceptions is where the AI starts to break down. So can a developer go take a look at Zillow and say, oh, I wonder what this site is worth? Well, what Zillow says that particular acre site is worth is irrelevant because we don't know what the developer wants to put there. What they want to put there and build in terms of improvement, they're going to reverse engineer back to the land value. So these artificial intelligence and these data points are good until they're not, until they start to break down with exceptions. That's when the human experience comes in and tries to put the pieces of the puzzle together and draw a conclusion.
But
and there's an emotional side to real estate that really is completely outside of the technology's capabilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially in the residential side.
Yeah, when I first got into real estate, just as a little joke, well, just as a little funny thing, my dad told me when I first got into real estate, Mark, and I got into the sales side, residential sales was how I got into this business. And then it kind of took off into other silos. But when I first got into the business, my dad told me, Mark, listen, if somebody wants to buy a house, there's nothing you're going to tell them that's going to prevent them from buying that property. If they don't want to buy the house, there's nothing you're going to tell them that's going to make them buy it. So it's all based on emotion. You can drill down into the numbers, but even when I've dealt with some investors, they say, you know, find me a property where I can drive by it when I go to the golf course every day. Well, that doesn't have any numeric basic. It's just, well, I want to show my friends that, oh, that's mine. So there are always these emotional elements to even investment in commercial. Is the developer or the investor will say, nope, it's just based on numbers. But when you drill down, there's going to be a little bit of layer of emotion in there, without a doubt.
I think all professionals in the business echo what we're saying here to you attendees, and that is that we combine all of these support systems. We have, Guillermo spits out tons of information. What's important to a guy like me is which information and when is it provided and to whom is it provided. And I suspect that Greg's money is kind of expensive money and it's looking for, decent returns. There are others who just want to drive by the building and say it's mine.
Yep.
And it depends on who the investor is, to whom are we reporting. But there used to be that all of these factors matter. And there used to be a crooked politician from Massachusetts. He was a Speaker of the House named Tip O'Neill. And only I am old enough to remember this guy, but this guy used to have a saying that all politics is local. And that's back in the 70s. And I adopted his saying to all real estate is local. And I don't know that I was the original gangster on that phrase, but everybody in the business knows that all real estate is local and it all matters. And we listen to other brokers, we watch and absorb the data that Guillermo produces, and we talk to appraisers and banks and lenders about their views on the market.
I
Well,
think
Michael, I'm sorry, but I think you're right that the real estate is local, but going back to technology, I think technology has changed it quite a lot. So because of technology, I mean, I used to buy houses in Atlanta from Los Angeles, because of Redfin or because of Zillow, at least to get some kind of a general knowledge, educate myself. I've never been to, some of the places I, at least started to searching and finally closing on a deal. I think in that sense, real estate made it a little more, the technology made real estate a little more, I would say, international even, right? Especially, we see a lot of international buyers in Los Angeles. I work with international buyers who bought properties just based on, Google Maps views without even flying in. Or just pulling comps off of CoStar. Like, you couldn't do that before. And the interesting thing is that when you actually deal with, I would say, older generation brokers, they still feel like, they're in control of the deal, way more than they should feel like that, because it's probably it's coming from like, the 90s, where I didn't have access to CoStar, or I didn't have access to LoopNet or any other MLS systems. So they could have told me anything, whatever they wanted. But now, we get 100 deals on our table. We just go to CoStar. We don't even look at the 98 because we just, spend, a day, pull the comps, see what's good, what's bad. And then, we pursue only the two deals that we really feel strong about. Versus like 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, we would just, probably spend like 2-3 weeks to even, find out if, what we should kind of pass on the second stage of due diligence, right? So, yes, real estate is local, very local, but again, technology, I think, is changing that.
I think technology has definitely made our local real estate more international. Obviously, we can Google Earth, we can Google Map, we can even do a, kind of a street scene, kind of virtually drive down the street to see what that block might feel like, even while it's on our screen. I think as well that for the international investor, it makes the process a little bit easier, not so much drag, there's a little bit more traction in the deal. And as well, international investors are attracted because what are they honestly looking for? Most of the, I don't deal with a lot of international investors. I have had a few clients over the years, and what they've told me, they're not really looking primarily at returns. they're looking for safe places to drop their cash. And so a lot of this international investment is, Greg says, well, we have to look at the comps. Yes, that's probably true. But a lot of people that I'm talking to say, well, let's just dump it in because it's a safe place to put the money.
Echo
Yeah,
both.
good for you, Mark.
And
Good for you.
technology allows that to happen more quickly, for sure.
Yeah, no, echoing and actually, if I didn't emphasize enough, what Greg was saying was absolutely true. It has, I think you used the phrase technology has changed real estate a little bit. I think it's changed it dramatically. So I totally agree. And for attendees, Greg mentions, and so did Mark, a couple of services, and I think we should mention those. We've mentioned some of the services for residential, like Zillow and Redfin, and those guys, the National Association of Realtors, Realtor.com. Those are all residential services. We should also mention commercial, and there are a number of services. I think someone already used the name CoStar. There's LoopNet, there's AIR, Association of Industrial Realtors, SOIR, there's Reese, there's a new company that's actually free to some extent. None of these are really free. TurnVest just came out, TurnVest Commercial Real Estate. So these are all commercial services that do not cater on the residential side. So there are tons of, actually, maybe Guillermo can speak to some of these services if he provides, if any of them are his clients, but there's a ton of providers, service providers. On the residential side, we didn't mention the new services such as iBuyers and HomeLight. HomeLight is the cash trading program on houses. There's Side Inc. Side Inc. is, I think it's licensed in every state as a brokerage, and they will be your sponsoring broker in every state if you want to open an office. So you don't need an individual with a broker's license to open an office in Texas or Arizona or Florida. You can use Side Inc. to do that, and they provide all the so-called white label services. There's Revive. Revive is a home renovation company. I have a buddy who did a listing in Palisades. I think I'm going to use round numbers. The house had been vacant and left open for 15 to 20 years. It was in ridiculous condition. The family wanted to sell it. The listing broker hired Revive. They spent $300,000 on renovations and they sold 5.2. So that these kind of uses, there's virtual offices now. You don't need a physical space. What's the brokerage? Guys, what's the brokerage that has no physical space?
EXP.
Thank you, EXP. EXP announced that they want 500,000 licensees in the United States, which would be more than 25% of all the members of the National Association of Realtors. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Mike speaks to bricks and mortar brokerage. I'm part of a cloud-based brokerage. I do, brokerage as well as investments and stuff like that. Brokerage isn't the only thing that I do, but I segued to that model, Mike. What was it? November of last year. I started looking at kind of the brokerage model that I was part of, thinking, well, wow, I'm spending way too much money. I have a whole home setup. Pandemic kind of exposed these rifts and these fault lines in terms of we don't really need to go into bricks and mortar facilities anymore. And so I made that transition about a year ago. And I think that's what a lot of consumers are doing as well. It's impacting the real estate market. It really, truly is. Configurations are changing. Site plans are changing. Architects, developers are responding to new home buyer needs post-pandemic. And so we're right in the thick of it, and it's changing right before our eyes.
I think one element of, because the easy winnings have been, again, front loaded to the consumer, they're becoming more educated because of premium models and free models that just give you something to sink your teeth in. But I think it's also requiring real estate personas and personalities to up their game. Like, the easy games are over. Now it's like, you really have to be more understanding of the different aspects of purchasing and selling and investments, right? You can't just make something up and because it's going to be validated by somebody else. So you really have to be more educated, more hands-on. You need more experience. You just need more of everything to up your game so that you can offset what has been lost by the easy winnings. So I think the barrier to entry has both been facilitated by tech giving you more tools to make your job easier, but then it's also made your job harder because you got to get smarter about the industry. I don't know if you guys want to talk about like how much more education, how much more in-depth analysis of each kind of experience you have to go through.
I think the also what I forgot to mention was the use of social media. I think everybody should talk to that. The you know, especially on the residential side, there is much more individual branding occurring with licensees. Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, WeChat, they're all using it to, and it's free. I mean, now it can be eliminated at a moment's notice if a stock price for Twitter drops, but temporarily it's all free. Licensees are branding themselves as luxury specialists or whatever they do, and they're using these social media platforms for that purpose.
I think that's a good point, Mike. Social media, in terms of people who I talk to still in the business, real estate agents and brokers, say just that social media really does help reinforce a brand image, reinforce their brand promise, whatever that promise might be. They have to come up with a unique selling proposition. Every business needs a USP, regardless of what we do. But what I try and kind of expose as well is that while social media is really good about reinforcing a brand image or a brand promise, that licensees should not rely on social media for new customers or new appointments to reinforce what they do. But brokerage is still, even with all the technology, brokerage is still kind of an appointment type of a business. And how do you do these appointments? Well, we've got to get on the phone. We've got to meet somebody. We've got to have a conversation to set and right. Exactly. That's just the nature of, we've got the tools, but relying on social media to get clients, I think is, I don't know. I'm not convinced that that's a valid thing to do, other than maybe reinforced brand images. And so what I teach my principal students, my pre-licensing students, is this: don't get fooled by the bright, shiny objects of technology. It's still a phone contact type of a business. When developers, I interviewed developers for my development class that I'm teaching this quarter at UCLA. Hey, how are you finding your sites? How are you finding properties to develop? They do it in two ways. One, either rely exclusively on brokers, which is, in my opinion, not the way to go. Two, rely exclusively on in-house acquisitions, which is not the right way to go. We've got to do both. We've got to do both. So social media, great for brand imaging, but brokerage and developers were still on the phone, old-fashioned, analog, dialing people and talking to them for business. Mike, I'm sure this is what you do to get new property management business.
You put it perfectly. The reality for those who want to get their license for the purpose of being in sales, whether it's commercial or residential, it's the same thing. It's all about lead generation. You generate leads. That's what you do, especially your first few years. And in your first few years, you're gonna be representing buyers, and they're gonna screw you, and they're gonna go with someone else all the time. So you're gonna learn. The average residential licensee in this country in their first year sells 1 or 2 homes.
Yep.
There are only so many listings to go around. You're going to struggle. The Guillermo refers to the education requirement. I think actually there's part of social media. The utility of social media is to provide education to those who follow that broker. And I know brokers who send out video clips, 1 or 2 minutes every 2 weeks, and say they educate people. So, and that's really important. I mean, Mark and I know that when people step into our classrooms, and of course, Mark and Enrique also know this, they know almost nothing about real estate. There are very few people who come through our classes who are somehow in the business. They may be in related businesses like architecture or engineering or some other aspect of real estate, but they come in not knowing anything. And it's really important for Mark and I to educate them, smash as much information into their heads as possible, and hopefully retain it. And then that helps those students decide whether they want to be in real estate. I mean, I think it's certainly critical that we know what we want to do with our lives, but it's probably more critical that we know what we don't want to do. And every term we have a few dropouts, and I think that's a sign of success, that the student comes in, attends a class or two and says, oh, this isn't for me. Or the others who say, geez, this is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah. I'd rather have somebody, Mike, say, oh, wow, especially on the sales side, say, oh, wow, this isn't for me, rather than have them go through a year or two of just mediocre, horrific income, and that, you know, they get out of the business or they don't renew their license within the first 2 years. You know, 50% of licensees will not renew their license after the first 4 years. And it's primarily because they don't know how to prospect. They don't know how to set appointments. This isn't a sales training course. We're talking about technology, but you know, technology's out there, but you still have to do, especially on the sales side, the hardcore appointment setting process.
Yeah, I see all of my bosses are, all of Mark's and my bosses are on this, Enrique and Mark Ramsmeyer, and also Lena. Hi,
Yeah.
Lena. And they, I guess almost every year, Extension sponsors another seminar on real estate careers in Los Angeles. And Mark has set that up for many years now, Enrique. And that seminar, during that seminar, some of us panelists go through other potential careers. And for those of you attending this seminar, the reality is that there are tons of real estate careers. I mean, just now you saw, I mean, with the panelists describing their businesses, there are so many different careers in real estate, and they don't all necessarily involve sales.
Right. Yeah. Real estate is a very, very vast field, everybody, from financing, brokerage, engineering, architecture, planning, construction, equity sources, environmental review, all types of things. And it's a vast, vast business.
And there's a low barrier of entry for the most part.
Greg's in asset management, Guillermo's in data. You know, I'm in commercial, Mark's in everything. And there's, you know, and we haven't mentioned things like urban planning, land use. There's, you know, agriculture is, I think California is the largest agricultural state in the country. That's real estate. It's not ag, it's real estate. Energy development, power plants, water usage. Water is real estate. There's so many different careers, and UCLA offers a lot of extension, offers a lot of courses in those areas.
Yeah. Mark, right. you mentioned something about a low barrier to entry.
In the field, yes. I think career-wise, like you said, it's not only very diverse, but getting started is not. There's not a real high barrier. You see people coming to real estate from all different, like someone mentioned earlier, from all different industries. They come from all over.
Right.
Now, so that's not to say that the education isn't important in the long run. I mean, in order to get ahead in the industry, I think you do need to get trained and get the information that you need. Some of it can be on the job, but I think some of it does need to take place in the classroom for a lot of people.
Yeah, and to as Mark Ruff knows, the requirements to obtain a real estate license are you have to be 18, breathing, take 3 courses, and pass an exam. Oh, and you have to be honest and truthful. So those are the requirements. The broker requirements are a little more stringent, but you can accumulate those prerequisites during your licensing as a salesperson. And Mark is correct that the barrier is very low. You don't have to be a citizen of the United. You don't have to be lawfully present in the United States. You don't have to have any education whatsoever other than the 3 required courses: principles, practices, and an elective from a list of courses. So that's it. It's a really low barrier to entry profession. It can be a great profession if you get in and perfect your craft.
I mean, yeah, on the licensing side, at least we do have a hoop that somebody has to jump through called passing a state exam. On the construction side, there's a hoop that you have to jump through to pass a general contractor state exam. Thank goodness. On the investment side, On the development side, it's a very low barrier to entry, even lower than that. The only thing that you have to have on the development side is a site and some money. And even if that money's not yours, well, ideally even better, access to someone else's. So when we're talking about, at least on the licensing side, Mike, there is a hoop that we have to jump through, but on development, nope. To be a real estate investor, all you have to do is write a check. To be a developer, find a site, put the money together, hire an architect. At least architects have to pass, a state exam. Developers and investors don't. All you have to have is money of your own or access to someone else's. So on the license,
Greg and Guillermo, what are the educational requirements for asset management and data?
For asset management, I mean, there are two career tracks. I know a person who didn't graduate, high school, but still an asset manager. That's probably, it's 1% chance. You have higher chances of, but then, you got to grow from the bottom up, right? So you got to be on site and then become a property manager, and it will take you 15 years to become an asset manager. I think you got to have at least like bachelor's, I would say, to become, you have a university degree. It's not as much about certification in asset management. So you got to be financially savvy. So you got to know Excel, financial analysis, Argus, that's not like if you're in commercial real estate. That's another course that the participants can take at UCLA. So that's a very good, actually, knowledge to have if you're applying any time to become an asset manager. Master's, I would say bachelor's and master's degrees, but again, you can complement. What happens is real estate, real estate all changes, right? So it always evolves. So some of us graduated from university, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I've had actually quite a bit of people who, had a current job or were currently as an asset manager, but they used UCLA for upgrading their knowledge. Or to get additional training in matters like tenant laws, in matters like Argus, financial analysis, or real estate market analysis. So
real estate laws and tax laws change all the time. And so the need for continuing education in a lot of these areas is really important.
And as I said before, because of technology, right? Nowadays you can't just, BS anymore. Your clients, your investors. So you gotta be very, very knowledgeable yourself. Otherwise, they're gonna take the UCLA course themselves and then challenge you on your next presentation.
That's a great advertisement for extension.
yeah.
So on the tech side, like the tech careers, that definitely bleed into real estate areas, because every real estate business as it grows needs technical resources. I think the big and fancy ones, like data scientists, which are becoming more and more popular. 5-10 years ago, it wasn't even a thing. There were database architects and things like that. Now data scientists, they definitely need to be highly educated. More often than not, they have second and third degrees on top of their just primary college education. A lot of times they do have masters and MBAs and all kinds of accreditations, sometimes doctorate degrees as well, because there's so much logic and just education. And there's only a handfuls of those actual people out there. Most of them are being acquired or hired right out of college, or people from the industry going back in to get more educated on data science and its concepts, to move into those really high value careers. From the traditional IT standpoint and database standpoint, one can argue today 90 to 80% of those are they must be college educated. They must have 1 or 2 degrees on top of having growing experience, in programming and database management, integrations and APIs, blah, 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 blah. A lot of engineering degrees and things like that. But I know in the last 5 years, possibly a little bit longer than that, but not by much, there's a lot more boot camps that allow handfuls, talking small handfuls of people who maybe haven't had a traditional college education or general education, just because of the life experiences have detracted them from those possibilities or cost factors. And yes, there is a 1 to 10% population that are edge cases that are pushing really hard to grow up. But a lot of time, even those populations realize, okay, I cut my teeth by taking a boot camp and learning the basics. I've got that introductory level tech job, but I'm realizing I need more education. I need more information. I need more rapid fire growth that the 9 to 5 might not provide me. And so a lot of times companies do offer, good companies offer education reimbursement programs. And a lot of those tech people that came in through the back door, boot camps and things like that, they still go back to college and they get that degree in computer sciences or whatever, and they realize this was actually the path. So there are different ways. Again, more common than not, you really do need a college degree, and certifications in the tech world are extremely common and highly recommended unless you're like a 20-year veteran and they didn't exist back in the day, or there was only one really easy cert that you don't have to go backwards for. So there's a lot.
One of those options that's coming up, actually, we just got the first internal approval for our new AI FinTech certificate. And that's going to add, combine financial knowledge and background with programming for the AI portion of it. So you'll be getting a little bit of the finance background and a little bit of the AI programming background all together in one program. And so the internal approval here at Extension's already happened, and now it has to go to campus for the final approval. But that should be launching within the next year.
Congratulations. I want to expand, or not expand, but confirm what Guillermo said. I'm an overachiever. I have at least 2 degrees. I have a number of licenses, and I also attended grad school, though didn't obtain any master's degree. And for the first 10 years in the business, I felt college was essential for any new hire. The last 15 years or so, I have come down off of that requirement, and I no longer require any college. I require experience, and experience. We also look at personalities, especially in the property management side. We need personalities who are calm, level-headed, thinking, processing people, and that doesn't require any degree. It requires a personality and a certain intellectual level, whether or not you have initials behind your name. And so we hire people that we have. I have about 35 employees or 40 employees, and most of them do not have college degrees, nor do they have real estate licenses. And we have real estate licenses and we have college degrees. To Guillermo's point about continuing education, we have paid for long-term employees to obtain their associate's degree in various areas in real estate and also accounting. And we subscribe to a number of services that provide continuing education for all of our employees. We always invest in our employees. And I think that if an employee knows that you like them and you invest in them, they exhibit more loyalty.
I want to go work with Mike.
Now, we can't afford you, Mark.
Sounds like a great place to work.
But I want to come back to Greg's point earlier in the discussion about reducing expenses and to clients. If anything, the last 3 years have caused our expenses to increase dramatically. First of all, with employee compensation, all of our employee expenses, salary alone, has gone up probably in the range of 26 to 33% in just 3 years, just to keep people happy. And this is all mostly due to COVID regulations and the abrogation of contract law in this state by the Supreme Court and local elected and unelected officials. And that has increased our workload dramatically. especially on the multifamily side, but in all aspects. And we have decided to, and another area where it's really expensive to operate is in property management is insurance. Used to be about a dozen carriers in California. Now it's down to 6. And it's very difficult to get E&O and general liability insurance policies at reasonable rates, not to mention workers' comp. So I just got a renewal in August on our workers' comp policy. And we were pleased because our brokerage told us that we have the lowest workers' comp rate possible. And my response to them was, oh, so the only way to go is up? and it's true, it's only up.
Well, I think Mike illustrates a very good point. I know this is a technology discussion, but while we're on it, if I can piggyback on that, for the first time in California's history, we lost a seat in Congress because there's more people moving out than moving in. And I think one of the things that Mike illustrates is, well, why is that? Well, it's tough to run a business in California, and the thing about it is that the people who are moving from this state are not at the $50,000 a year level. They're at between $100,000 and $200,000 a year who are moving out. They're moving to Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Florida, Washington, because one of the things, as we mentioned before, the pandemic has exposed is that we don't really have to, a lot of us don't have to be in California anymore. We can still do work here. We can send it in. I'm sitting at my home in Los Angeles. Right? We can do this. We don't have to be here as like we had to before. So California is becoming a tough state. People are leaving. Businesses are saying, I can't make it here anymore. What I tell my pre-licensing students, Mike, is that don't be fearful of this because it just creates more need for your services. People are going to have to move. And you're right. They're going to be replaced by others who want to be here. So from the brokerage perspective, real estate perspective, we're millions of homes behind. So we need more construction. We need more real estate. The apps are helpful, but they're not the say all be all of everything in real estate.
We've worked for a lot of asset managers over the years, and we property managers always agree that the asset managers make more money than anyone else.
Why is that, Mike?
No comment, Greg? You're muted.
Oh, I'm saying, yeah, that's right. That's the reason why I got 2 masters instead of just 1, so I can be an asset manager.
No, it is a great business for you attendees. Asset management is intriguing, and Greg's right. For asset management, you do need, and Guillermo's right, the same way. You do need more education for that and more certifications. But there are programs out there, like Guillermo mentioned, boot camps for some people to attend to learn. You don't necessarily need a degree to understand Argus. You can learn Argus, and Greg can teach you.
You don't need a finance degree to learn how to crunch numbers. We can teach you how to do that. You don't need a bachelor's or a master's degree to learn the concepts of real estate development or the nature of product types, multifamily, residential, retail, office, industrial, hotel, mixed use. You don't have to. I mean, if I can just make a real quick plug, if you take a look at all the courses that are offered here at UCLA Extension, there's some instructors right here, you can kind of plug and play. What do you want to learn about? Well, I want to learn about real estate development. Okay, take a course in development. What do you want to learn about? I'd like to learn how to underwrite investment properties. I have some cash. I'd like to buy an apartment property. My CPA says I'm getting killed in taxes, so it might make sense for me to do something on the investment side, but I don't know how to underwrite it. I don't know how to review it. What do I look for? We can teach you how to do that. If you want to build something, we can teach you how to do that too. You want to invest in something? No problem. We'll teach you how to do that. So lots of different plug and plays here. You don't have to have a college degree to learn this stuff.
And I think one of the benefits, actually, if I may say, at least, going through university and then going now through, as an instructor at Extension, is that I think the instructors at UCLA Extension are more, we have industry background more than academic background, I would say. So, and that helps, at least, our students probably, that we teach we give them the skill set that they can be used at the job, right? The next day, you can, if you are, for example, if you're taking financial analysis course or you're taking property management course, I focus more on cases. I focus more on that. What you need to do at your job if you are asked that question, if you need to address this issue, rather than let's go and have this general discussion about how the theory works. So I think I haven't taught at the university, but at least I think one of the challenges for me getting into real estate field after my master's degree was that the knowledge that I got at the school was very theoretical. It was not really applicable in the real world. So, and I had to spend probably a year or two to get to a level that I can do my duties without being trained, right, in the field that I was working in. So, and I think that's one of the greater benefits of going and picking the courses through extension. Is that even if you have a degree, but if you learn corporate finance at school, at the master's level or bachelor, it's totally different than you would take like an investment course at UCLA. Because if you investment course in UCLA, you learn, hey, if I'm buying my own property, how I analyze it, not like, hey, if you become the CEO of this huge investment company, what are the ratios you're going to look at? Well, most of us are not planning to become CEOs of big investment companies for the next 20 years, maybe, So, right? That's just, I think that's another great benefit, taking the courses like UCLA.
I think straying from the topic of the panel, I think Greg's point is the most important point to take away from this panel, that we don't teach for a living. None of us. We do for a living. We are all educated. We're saying that you don't have to be educated to take our courses and learn and become a competent professional in your business and make good money. I sat in on Mark Ruff's investment analysis course once, just to learn from him. Even though I'm in the business, I learned. I think what you get from UCLA Extension is worth the price. We're more expensive than other continuing education programs, particularly in the licensing area. You can go online and take 3 courses for $250, $300. You're not going to get an extension course for $300. But what I will say is I've been offered to teach, I'm sure Mark has too, at these licensing courses, private providers, and they do crash courses for 3 days in person. But most of the time you're in that course is spent in practice exams. Practice exams are important because the exams are gatekeeping exams and you want to pass them to get in. So you want to know how to take the exam and get through. But the reality is we spend 40 hours in lecture and programs and discussion and analysis in our classrooms. Those private licensing programs providers do not do that. And contrary to Greg's, he took a year or two to come up to speed. I took 10 to 15 years to come up to speed after government education. And and I will tell you, being a lawyer, I graduated from law school, I passed the bar. It's black and white, right? Well, no, it isn't. We live in a world of gray in our business. And I don't care what the book says and what the law says. The reality is you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis in relationships. They are contractual relationships. You have obligations, but you still maneuver within those contractual obligations. And our business is about contracts. Our business is about leases and purchase and sale agreements and promissory notes and loan documents. And, so it's important to learn that stuff. And you learn that stuff on the job. You learn that working for guys like Greg and Guillermo in their companies because they teach you.
I think one of the funny parts, ironically, I think some of the things that the ways tech have influenced real estate and broadly a lot of modern day living jobs, right? Many of us, not necessarily raising my hand, but many of us in general didn't sign up to be a technical person, didn't sign up to be a software user, but because technology is, to use the fancy word, disrupting every job and prying into all of our actual regular jobs, it requires a level of knowledge and understand, at least at a base level, how does an application work? What value does the application provide me? How can it not just be disruptive, but how can I use that technology to my advantage? I think Greg mentioned earlier, right? It's allowed his team to work better, faster, smarter, and get rid of the menial jobs and be higher performers by like auto dialing 1,000 different people, bringing in more leads into the system, kind of scoring leads better with better algorithms, measuring performance of lead generation and conversion ratios and things like that, and understanding all the data that you're being provided by this app or that app and that app, and how do I centralize all that stuff? And because of all the noises of all these applications, the one fundamental thing they're all providing me is, how do I consolidate all this information? Now that I have it, how do I maneuver it? And how do I strategically get value back from it? So it's not just another tool that I put in the toolbox, but another tool that I put in my platform, so that I can look at like a holistic view of my customers, my assets, my properties, my lead generation, and that, right? So a lot of what you learn is not just how do I check the box, but why is the box in said parameters, and when do I check it? How often should I check it? And how do I measure the performance of said function, generally speaking, right? So it forces leaders and day-to-day end users and day-to-day business constituents, like, how can I utilize the tools and the technologies that I'm being forced to use because the market moves with all new cutting edge things, and how do I not just make it a distraction, but how do I maximize the utilization of it, and how can I improve upon it, right? So a lot of these tools, like a CRM, you can turn them on and they provide a value, but many of the times that's not the end game. The end game is, how do I make a malleable product make me more efficient, so I don't have to memorize somebody's birthday, so I don't have to memorize when that contract is coming up for expiration, so I don't have to memorize that redlining in the negotiation process through a contract process. I have to figure out, like, how do I squeeze out another half hour out of my day so I can go either play with my family and kids or my spouse or significant other, or spend 30 more minutes on another deal to close and get on that phone call to be more personal with that human touch on the other side, or get to that site visit to give them my more in-depth perspective versus their vanilla general output of what just a churn and burn algorithm like a Zillow or whatever might just dump out to you. So you have to work harder, smarter.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Guillermo, is that technology is only valuable in the value it creates for the business. I mean, it's definitely a useful tool, and like you said, it's in all industries now, more and more. But the value, it's the value it creates for the business. It's not the technology itself that makes it worthwhile. So there's two things I want to do. Let's open it up. If people in the audience have questions, enter them in the chat so we can get to them. In the meantime, let's flip the switch a little bit on the conversation. I like the conversation about the value of taking classes with us, but let's go on a little bit further about the algorithms, because we've seen the articles about Zillow using the algorithm, about algorithms for setting prices for rental properties. And there's been an argument in both cases that these algorithms have limited the opportunity for especially first-time home buyers and people with trying to enter the market, whether it be as an investor or as a homeowner or another area. to get into the market, because the competition with some of these companies using an algorithm are buying up the companies, buying up the homes first, or limiting the access to some of these investors. They're smaller investors. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if I can, I'll start it off, but I'm not as familiar with this as my colleagues. But I know it was Zillow who bought all those houses and then had to dump them all.
Yep.
Was it Zillow? Yeah. So they had entered heavily into the home buying market to resell and had to dump. I think it was just a few months ago. They decided to dump that whole portfolio. So maybe the algorithms didn't work out for them.
Yeah, or maybe they just bought so much inventory, Mike, they realized they were probably at the peak of the market cycle. And now they want to just unload it because they could probably get the best price before prices go down. You know, market cycles, Dr.
Actually, I've tried. I mean, I've tried Zillow to offload one of my properties, personal properties. So it was a very interesting experience. I think, so Zillow, basically what they did, I don't think they relied that much on their formulas, but what they relied on third-party services. So for inspection, they relied on like Home Depot's like inspection service. So Home Depot guy would just show up to an inspection, thorough inspection, and then they would basically give you a lower price than the market, say about 10 to 15. They would give you 10 to 15% lower than the market price, and then if you agreed, they would pay you. If you didn't agree, they would keep calling you for like 2 times a week. I mean, is our offer still valid?
I think that format is essentially just basically buyers trying to buy essentially for sale by owners. Basically, if you're not really being exposed to the market, for sale by owners, I know this isn't a sales class, but for sale by owners, leave about 20% equity on the table. The National Association of Realtors does this study every single year. And they say invariably, the data is clear. For sale by owners don't get as much as they could if they list with a broker. I happen to be part of EXP. I'm an approved, certified express offers agent, and I can't stand the model because, if I go to somebody's home and they say, yes, I'd like to sell my property. I say, well, I've got this whiz bang program that Greg alluded to, where we don't even have to bring your home to the market. Isn't this just amazing? And we'll bring you an offer sight unseen. You probably don't even have to do any repairs. It's kind of odd, Greg, that Home Depot is agreeing to be the inspection service for homes because they're already there with supplies and materials to come in and do the work. So most of the time people leave money on the table in these types of situations. And that I actually don't believe benefits the consumer. I don't believe that. They're leaving money on the table.
They're definitely, I think they're more, they are addressing consumers that need the cash, immediately. They don't have the time for because literally you can complete the transaction within a week.
Yeah.
So
I read an article.
That type of service.
Yeah. Greg, you probably read it as well. Whereas I think the headline of the article was saving the commission at any price. And so homeowners sometimes think that, well, if I get an offer, I don't have to pay a commission. Well, yeah, you might be saving 6%, but you're really leaving 20% on the table. So even if I charged you 12, you're still going to be ahead of the game. And so sadly, that's the attitude that's out there. So these apps, artificial intelligence, will give you an offer. You don't have to pay a commission, right? There's always that hook on the front end, but what they don't realize is that they're really leaving more on the table than what they're saving.
Hey, Greg, your boss, Lena, has asked you to tell us more about Argus.
Okay. Well, Argus, I started using Argus in 2005, and I'm assuming they were still around probably from 1996. Argus was a program, started out as a program, probably similar to Yardi. Some guy just came up with an idea, offer a standardized cash flow analysis program. Because one of the challenges of commercial real estate is that we buy, commercial real estate buyers make their decision based on on the cash flows that they can get on the property. So to model the cash flows, you use Excel, right? For the most part. If you're using Excel, the issue is that every seller or every buyer or a broker, they end up having their own version of Excel. So how you communicate that the same, like Excel, right? Even within an industry. So, and Argus is a tool that standardizes the cash flow modeling process. So, for example, I'll give an example. If you have a property, first of all, there's a broker who's involved who's modeling the cash flows for the property. So the broker creates an Argus model. When you're a buyer, when you're asking, hey, what's the profitability of the project? As an investor, I always request for an Argus model so I can open that model, like that program, and I can see the cash flows. What has been, what's the input, right? What are the rents? What are the expenses? What are my lease terms, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and because that program and software is specialized software, you cannot do the same thing in 100 ways. So when I get an Argus, I more or less know how to audit that spreadsheet and to make my informed decision on the project. Where else, if I just get an Excel spreadsheet, like I don't know the logic behind it, right? Every analyst creates spreadsheets in his own way. So I'm not going to sit there and learn all these different sheets and all these different formulas that this specific analyst used. And imagine me working with like 15 different analysts throughout a year. Like I can't carry that information in my head. So that's why, Argus helps me as a technology, number one, to understand the cash flows more in real time in terms of I know the logic, I know how, where to input and how to input and how to get the output. So I don't have to audit every number, every cash flow, every time I get the Argus. So in Argus, that's the reason. So that's number one, it's a great communication tool between different professionals in the field. Investor to investor, broker to broker, broker to investor, or seller to buyer, right? So you keep just exchanging this Argus cash flows where everybody understands it, if they have that knowledge, right? So if they don't, then you have to spend time, maybe days, trying to get into the mindset of the sender of that information. Hey, why did they, create it this way, the model or that way? That's number one. Number two, on investment side and investors, we use Argus for our, again, own modeling and budgeting purposes. Why? Because it's really easy to update. We don't have to recreate things. It's the same program. Once, the analyst learns that program, the next analyst who's coming on board or the next asset manager who's coming on board, he exactly knows what happened before him, exactly knows how to modify those models, he exactly knows how to use those models going forward. So communication tool, cash flow budgeting tool, and on sales side. So we don't have to, we can, if I have property that has Argus, I don't have to spend a lot of time to explain, right, to the buyer, the cash flows, the leases, and et cetera, et cetera. I just send them the file, which is standardized file. So in other words, it's easy to audit, guys. It's hard to cheat on Argus. If I'm getting an Argus file, it's really hard to cheat on it, meaning overestimate or overestimate the revenue or underestimate the expenses by playing with formulas. Because the formulas are already embedded in Argus. You can't manipulate those formulas. And that's what we teach at UCLA. There's an Argus certification program at UCLA where you specifically learn how to use the program. It's actually number one program in the industry, guys. I mean, there's nothing better and bigger than Argus right now. There are a lot of new startups that are trying to break into the field, but again, it's so widely used. Like, it's used by brokers, it's used by asset managers, it's used by investors, commercial real estate. And by the way, like Argus is used for retail, industrial, and office mainly. So it's not as popular for multifamily projects. But if you are in those three categories, so if you're planning to be in these three categories, I would strongly recommend you guys to take Argus course. Number one, for your own benefit, and number two is just there's also an Argus certification program. Like if you claim to your next employer that, hey, I have Argus certification, you're just going to stand out. So big time.
Great. That's great. The second question, Alex asks some career questions. He's changing careers into real estate and is asking for some guidance. So he's taking courses in real estate, and I think that's important. I think it's important you take finance from a guy like Mark. Legal aspects, Extension offers that too, because the legal aspects of real estate is critical. Argus, software, data, you have to understand that real estate is essential to being successful. As far as websites or organizations to visit every day or finding credible information, I think what the best thing to do there is to log into websites of areas of interest. If you think you might be interested in an area, like I said earlier, it's very important to find out what you want to do, and also more important to find out what you don't want to do. But if you like industrial real estate, you think you have a background in warehousing, maybe you like industrial since you know it from the ground up, and maybe you look into industrial. So you go to the AIR CRE website, Association of Industrial Realtors, Commercial Real Estate, and you will be bombarded with emails, of course, trying to get you to join and subscribe, but at least you'll get information. If you're and by the same token, if you're interested in, say, multifamily, then you go to apartment associations websites, or if you like retail, you go to ICSC. What's it stand for now? It used to be International Council of Shopping Centers, but now it's Innovative Communities Servicing, blah, blah, something. So you can go to that website. And there's so many. I mean, folks, you just get on these
and
websites.
Also you can,
yeah.
Yeah, and also I would also suggest using the commercial real estate websites, brokerage websites. I mean, they carry out some great research in terms of the market, and the rates. And
I absolutely love this question, because whenever I'm asked for like career advice, the first response I have is, well, what do you really want to do in real estate? Because real estate is this huge, huge bucket, everybody. There's so many different silos, so many kind of little different areas and veins where you can branch off and do different things. If you want to become a salesperson, like a sales agent or a real estate broker, that's all sales training. That's learning how to prospect, close for appointments, making pitches, making presentations, and closing for contracts, and then getting deals done. If you want to go into development, we'll learn about product types, learn about site selection. If you want to go into investments, learn about equity and how do you underwrite deals. What about location selection? You know, most of the value from a piece of real estate comes from outside the boundary of the property. So if we know those elements, then we have very little control. I mean, we have a lot of control over our site, but we have very little control over what goes on around it. So these are really kind of questions. I love this career advice question. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a builder? Do you want to be an investor? Do you want to be a developer? Do you want to be a property manager, asset manager? Each one of these silos has different skill sets. So I absolutely love this question. It's one of my favorite questions to answer.
I don't think anybody on the panel here is in the business now that they started out in 20, 30, 50, 70 years ago. We're all in a different way. And Guillermo, well, before we go back to Guillermo and Argus, you never know where you're going to end up. I had no plans on being in property management. My client, our client, bought a 280 unit apartment building in the Inland Empire. This is 25 years ago. And I went out there the day of closing. The resident manager quit. So I became the resident manager, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was stupid. I had 9-year-old kids yelling at me. I didn't know how to deal with that because I didn't have any kids of my own. And so it was it was really a trauma, actually. And then, but here I am 25 years later, this is what I do. And even getting into real estate in the initial part of my career was through an odd way that I won't go into. But yet, as far as how do I, work into this instead of, starting from the ground up is so important, as Greg said earlier today. But one of the keys is to, if you find out, as Mark said, what do you want to do? What area do you want to be in? What silo do you want to be in? And by the way, money, finance makes the wheels go round in our business. It's all about money. It's all about finance. So you have to know finance. But if you want to be in a sales team, or if you want to work in a brokerage, if you want to be in a specific asset management company or data provider service tech company, then go to the companies that have the best reputations, that are ethical, that conduct their business in a professional, competent way, and connect yourself to somebody who's been in the industry for a while. So, for example, if you want to be in sales, whatever, leasing, go join a team of people. Be the grunt. You get cut in on deals. You get $500, or you get $1,000, or you sit open houses, or you hang leasing signs for retail. Whatever you do, join a team. You make so much more money in this business when you share than when you try to keep it all for yourself. And because our business is based on, a lot of the business based on commissions in that respect. So you get plugged into a network that it took me 25 years to build, and you get plugged into my network, or Mark's, or Greg's, and you're plugged into a network that is already accomplished. So go learn your stuff from, and that's also how you learn, because those people are probably pretty smart too. So back to Argus, Guillermo.
Oh, yeah, I'm not familiar with the Argus application. So that was more Greg, I
I
think.
thought there was a point. I'm sorry, did I misread?
No, you're okay.
Okay. Any other questions? That's it.
Well, Alex had a couple in here on that. One was, can he help a broker even if he doesn't have a license? And how does he get experience in the field without diving in fully, or is there a way?
I'll take that. And I'm sure Mike can take it too, because we both teach those types of courses for people to get their real estate licenses. So there's 3 courses, as Mike mentioned earlier. You're limited in what you can do when you are not yet licensed. You can be somebody's administrative assistant. You can be somebody's kind of gopher, so to speak, helping move paper around, but you can't solicit clients. You can't solicit sellers or buyers. You can't quote interest rates. You can't even quote the price of a property that may be on the market. So yes, you can help, but what you can do without a license, again, is going to be somewhat limited.
I don't think that there's, there used to be in the old days, for example, in residential real estate, there used to be the grandmother or the aunt that was the part-time real estate agent on weekends selling properties. But I think that's out the window. It is definitely out the window. Brokerages don't want part-timers. They want performers. They want producers. And it's the old 80-20 rule that never goes away. It might even be 90-10 by these days, but 80% of sales is generated by 20% of the salespersons, and 20% of this, that 20% has been pretty consistent over the years. The point that we've made is you don't have to be in sales. There's a lot of careers here that do not involve sales, and UCLA Extension has courses in those areas, and we all teach that stuff.
Yeah. I think from that brokerage perspective, the person who asked that particular question, Mark, about what they can do without being quite licensed yet, you're going to make more money on the brokerage side if you're licensed and you're closing deals. But as I teach my students, once you pass the state exam, you have to ask yourself the question, now what do I do? We send you through 3 different modules of 45 hours a piece. You pass the final exams, you get your state license, congratulations. Well, half of the people who pass that exam the very first time won't renew their licenses. And that's really sad, because that's an identified solvable problem. How do you solve it? You have to learn how to sell. You know, going through a pre-licensing program is just to get your license. It's not sales training. We teach you about theory, principles, legal aspects, some forms that you have to be familiar with once you're out there pounding the pavement for business. But then sadly, most people won't do the work. And what's the work? Sorry, Mike. It's getting on the phone and calling people and making appointments. And so without a license, that's going to be tough to do. You're limited in terms of what you can do.
It's a sad statistic that so many licensees do not renew. First of all, as we said, it's a low barrier to entry profession. Secondly, once you get a license, whatever license or certification that you get, keep it. It's only going to get harder to get licensed and certified. I mean, Guillermo referred to it earlier. You know, there's some 20-year veterans who don't have these certifications, but that's because they're 20-year veterans and they know stuff. But to get into his end, now he's recommending advanced degrees. So once you get a license, keep it. It only takes the continuing education courses every 4 years of how many? 45 hours, right? 45, because I do the bar as well. So I have to get like 80 hours every 3 years or so. And for the brokers renewal, I noticed that they have now, the DRE requires an implicit bias training course now too, which wasn't existing before. So there's more and more requirements. One of my friends who's a residential broker, a heavy hitter, used to write articles for newspapers and the Wall Street Journal. And he is one of the reasons why we now have 3 required courses instead of 1 required course, because he once did a comparison of the required education requirements, doctor, lawyer, CPA, taxi driver, and a real estate licensee required less coursework than a beautician, a taxi driver, or a dog catcher. And so all of them required more licensing, more continuing education. So now we have for the 100 and whatever hours required of two required courses and an elective. So get your license and keep it. It does, and the renewal fees are very low.
I agree.
And one of the points you make is that they may start out thinking sales, but sales isn't for everybody. And, you know, it has its own skill sets, but there's financial analysis, there's all kinds of back support, there's property management, there's asset management, there's so many different areas that you can go into. It's really just a matter of finding what niche within the industry best fits your personality.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a matter of saying, you know, just because I got my sales license, all I can do is sell.
Oh, heavens no, there's so much in real estate that can be done. When I got my real estate license in 1988, it kind of opened doors for me that I hadn't accessed before, in terms of, you know, representing people, meeting people who had investment real estate, commercial real estate needs. So it sure did open a lot of doors, but there's so much more than brokerage and sales, so much more.
Yep.
Yeah, there's probably about 40. I have slides where I list 40 different careers in real estate.
That's great. Any other questions from the audience?
I don't see any.
Well, are there any final points from the panel, things that you don't think we've covered well enough, or something else that you would like to make sure that people have before they walk away from this?
Well, I do. I have a question for my colleagues. Each of you, will you each predict the beginning and end of the next recession?
Oh goodness. Holy cow, Mike, if I could do that, I'd have the world in my hands.
Well, you know, Greg, you're handling a lot of money, a lot of people's money, and maybe institutional money. What's the feedback you're getting from these investors about what, you know, we're going to have another 75 basis points bump here in the next meeting? You're going to have interest rates on commercial loans exceeding cap rates on the listing setup. What do you get? What are your investors telling you? You know,
I mean, we're an investor ourselves, so
what are you telling yourself?
but now let me just speak as Greg Deacon, okay?
Okay.
People, when people ask me, you know, so by the way, I predicted first job I was working in real estate fund in 2006. 2006, that's when I got into real estate, and I got a letter back in 2006 saying you're qualified for a loan. I walked into a bank. I said, listen, I never applied for a loan. You sent me this letter. I just want to know, like, is that right? And they told me, yes, that's right. I was like, don't you need to know more about me before you give me the loan? They're like, no, you've been our client for 10 years. So I was their client for 10 years because, back in college, I deposited $1,500 and forgot the login password, so that account kind of stayed at Bank of America for 10 years. They gave, they approved me for $250,000 loan, and I said, listen, the crisis is coming, it's going to blow up. There's no way, if they're giving me a loan because I had like a $1,500 account at Bank of America, like, so that. Why I'm giving this. So this time, I think, yes, crisis is coming as well, but we got to watch out. It's not going to be as severe as 2008. That's my personal opinion. Why? Because we don't have as much. The loans were not extended to people like me back in 2006, right? So the lenders are more prudent and were more prudent during this last 3-4 years. But I think we're going to go into recession next year, starting next year, probably. Because I already see what I see is that the sellers are still like kind of failing to realize that, hey, they cannot get the same price as they could 6 months ago. So just because of the loan interest increase, right? They're not willing to accept the reality. So on the residential side, they're not. On private equity side, they're not. On the institutional side, people accept the reality, but again, they're not willing to sell it and accept the loss now. They would rather hold on to it. So it really on the institutional side depends what's your horizon, because what happens on the institutional side, when you raise funds and you buy a property, so you have a business plan, right? So you tell your investors that, hey, I'm buying in 2019, I'm planning to sell it in 5 years. So if your horizon is, I would say, you're not planning to sell your property within the next 3 to 4 years, a lot of institutional investors are not selling it because they're not willing to accept the loss right now. So nobody wants to go back to their investors and tell them, I'm sorry, I lost your money. Why? Because we don't have to sell it right now. It's not in our business plan. Our business plan states early sale 2024-25. So, but yet there are investors that bought properties using bridge loans back in 2019 and 20. When I say bridge loans for the benefit of participants, these are the loans that were taken by investors to buy properties to flip them in like 2 years or 3 years. So those are the loans that have variable interest rate, and those loans will start being due probably in next year, 23 and 24. That's where we're gonna see definitely a dip of about 20% in commercial real estate prices. But again, I don't think that's going to be substantial because the amount of those loans were not significant, as they were back in 2008. So
this is valuable information, folks. I think these are words of wisdom. I agree with everything that Greg has said. I saw a statistic the other day that home foreclosures in this country are up 156% over last year. So when I hear a percentage, the only time I really want to hear percentages is when Greg tells me what my rate of return is. That's when I want to hear a percentage. Otherwise, I want to hear real dollar numbers or real numbers. I'm a numbers guy, data guy. And so I love when Guillermo feeds me the right data at the right time, because that's what we're about, as everybody said. So foreclosures are up 156%. Well, last year was the lowest number of foreclosures in American history. So that 156% merely represented another 50,000 foreclosures. Now, if you think you're going to pick up, if you come to Mark's and my classes, and we always have the students who say, I want to make money buying foreclosures or probate sales or anything. Sure, great, you go ahead. The reality is that partly as a result of monetary policy the last several years, under both administrations, nothing political, there is more money waiting to be deployed than in any time in American history, except for perhaps the Roman Empire. And this money, you're going to compete. You as an individual are going to compete with guys like Greg that have millions, tens of millions of dollars ready to deploy, buying all kinds of asset classes. So it's no free for all out there. And the last thing I'll say is every recession is different. And the only time we know when there's a recession is after it's over. So none of us know. And every recession is different. I've been through, I don't know, 3 or 4 of these things now, and none of them have been the same. And our business is built on distressed markets. That's how we came of age in the early 90s. And yet, every time a recession comes, it's always different from the last one.
Yeah, I think the only concluding comment that I might have, Mark, is, we were talking about AI and platforms and artificial intelligence and so forth. These tools are helpful. They certainly can benefit the consumer. They can benefit developers and investors, but we can't look to technology and apps and websites as the be all end all of everything in real estate. It still absolutely requires kind of a hard-nosed look at the numbers, the location, the political implications. Can we get the thing built or developed? And apps and artificial intelligence can never predict that. So that's why we still have to have people looking at the deals in the first place.
And real estate's always been a network-driven industry. People meeting, talking to, and knowing each other.
Yeah.
And Mark, going back to your comment, I think my personal experience from the, at least the last crisis or cycle was that the technology and the information behind the market really by 6 months to a year in terms of telling you the true story.
Good point.
That's my. So you guys, whoever wants to be in real estate, doesn't matter. You want to be a broker, you want to be an investor, whoever you want to be, you're aspired to be. Your best source of information for people.
Guillermo, when's the next recession?
I'm sure if you talk on the street, it's already here, depending on your income levels. But obviously, there's pressure at all income levels, regardless. Some take a bigger hit or not. 2 years. That being said, right? I think Michael, you made a perfect point, right? Yeah, and Mark, you guys make great points. Technology is going to be there. It's not the end all be all, but realize you can use 1, 2, 3, 20 applications and pieces of data sets. But it's not the holy grail. To Michael's point, the last 3, 4 recessions were vastly different, and each model is going to compensate for that. But each model cannot predict future unanticipated data sets that are unprecedented and changing. There's so much cash on the table. I know the current administration is infusing in sustainability projects and expansion there. So there's going to be a boom in some areas of the industries that will definitely impact real estate improvements and tech improvements from sustainability, heat pumps, solar, wind, electrification of all that stuff, right? Will it offset the entire dip? That's anybody's guess because it's a brand new model and sustainability is more of a trendy new thing that everybody's buying into and the administration is buying into, for better or for worse. I'm sure you could talk to all kinds of people. Will those funds be sustainable? And those are being released, I think, over the next 2 years. And they're still, they're still inking, letting the ink dry and still inking all that stuff. And how is that going to change the market, and how many rooftops are we going to cover, and how many gutting and rips and retrofits are they going to have to do, and how much disruption allocating construction resources. So is there going to be a boom and a bust? Probably at the same time, depending on which side of the table and which industries you're actually influencing. So really pick your positions and hang on for the future.
Buckle up.
Guillermo's point about the some sectors may be hit more than others is right on. In 2001, during the dot-com bomb, the only real estate that suffered was in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. We noticed no dip in 2001 with respect to real estate outside of those particular areas, maybe the Raleigh, North Carolina triangle.
One last thing, because I think Guillermo illustrated something I didn't want it to sneak by when he mentioned that there are so many different websites, applications, portals. There's no one universal perfect information source. Anybody in real estate recognizes that we have to plug and play and piece all of these little pieces together to try and come up with some semblance of order. And then finally, make a decision. Make a decision.
Well, we're going to give you one more chance to ask a question if you're in the audience.
Yeah, it's just stay away from, we're in the real business world. We're not in conspiracies and extremist positions and the world is ending and buy gold, okay? We're real estate people and we don't understand how a shiny substance that doesn't yield anything on a monthly basis is something we would ever invest in. So, because there's no return. I mean, you get a statement that says there's a return every month, but there's no return. So in real estate, you don't invest unless you get a return. May I be the first to thank my colleagues. Every time I'm on a panel like this, I learn from all my colleagues. So thank you.
I always learn from you, Mike. Good to see you, by the way. Haven't chatted.
Likewise, yeah, likewise. You too. Glad to have you back from the dark side.
Yeah. Thank you for all the panelists for your input and insights. It's been wonderful. And thank you for all the attendees for coming. And if there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and end it and give you back the last 15 minutes or so of your time in the day.